Okay, welcome to another episode of the Boss Experience podcast. I'm your host, Michele Davis, and I am here with Mesha Bazemore. And Mesha is CEO of Coco Twins, and she is a graphic design artist.
Mhm.
And I am so excited to be interviewing Mesha because we're going to be talking about how she sold her first NFT.
Mhm.
And NFT, the first time I heard the term NFT was from Mark Cuban. He made this comment. He was being interviewed, and he made this comment about, the direction of investing and what people should be putting their time and their energy in. And I made note of it, and I'm like, wow, okay, I've never heard of NFT. And then I've heard, probably over the last several years about blockchain and all of these different things. And so I think I first started hearing chatter about blockchain maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And not knowing what that was, it really sounded very confusing to me. So I kind of stayed out of it. But now I think in 2021, is when everyone's talking about NFTs, blockchain, and digital real estate, and people are selling pieces of real estate and NFTs for a lot of money. I came across Mesha. I was like, yeah, how did you do it? She was talking about how she sold her first NFT. It sounds like she actually had no knowledge of what an NFT was, and she self-educated about what it is, and actually sold her first piece. But before we get into how she did it, Mesha, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and say hi to the audience? Wait, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Good deal. All right. So absolutely, absolutely. I'm so sorry for that. Well, I've been drawing all of my life. All right. One of the things that I wanted to do, and let me back up a little bit. Hi, everybody. My name is Mesha Bazemore. I am the owner and illustrator for Coco Twins. Coco Twins is a digital art store that specializes in African American images. All right. And the way that it came to be was during a shopping trip for my 14-year-old twins, who at the time were 9, and they wanted school supplies with images on them that looked like them. All right. And anybody that looks like us knows that that's not something you can find easily. You might see one Barbie that tries to show representation for brown people, but that's about it. So, there was, we wanted to feel included. So instead of them getting upset, they trusted me with their ask. My background is in civil engineering design. I earned my certification as a civil engineer designer while on active duty in the Marine Corps. While in the Marine Corps, I ended up with 2 MOSs because one thing behind mindset that I like to teach people is sometimes failures are they're up, they take you up. So I
Now,
ended up with
Misha, tell people what an MOS is.
Okay, so MOS is military occupational specialty. So it's your job in the military. And because I didn't do well on the rifle range the first time, and I associate that with trauma with growing up in Detroit, Michigan. So my whole thing with weapons, and I was really nervous around them. So I ended up failing boot camp. Long story short, 2 jobs. The corporal, which is someone with higher ranking than me, he tossed both jobs up in the air and said, whichever one hits the floor first, that's your job. Ended up getting civil engineering as my job, which put me in a space of learning how to create digital, this was in 93, hand-drawn blueprints
Wow.
before we started doing using programs like AutoCAD, which deals with DWGs and DXFs, which are what the Cricut and the Silhouette, the Cameo Silhouette, both machine uses those. So I started doing the digital art in 94, had the opportunity to help revitalize Detroit, Michigan. My name is actually the lead name for the designers for Ford Field, Comerica Park in Detroit, Michigan, Campus Marshes, and the Riverwalk. And I also helped in the design of Cass Tech High School in Detroit, Michigan, which is like the rivalry school that I went to in Detroit. I went to King High School. And one of my experiences while at the high school was that I had to study Japanese. Ended up in Japan, my very first duty station, stuck in a train station for 3 days, and I had to use what I learned while I was there. All right, so that's where the whole ability and believing in myself, that's part of the journey. Getting through Marine Corps boot camp as an asthmatic, that's one thing that is like really, that blows people's minds, because they're like, you were never supposed to be allowed on active duty because you were a liability. But when it's for you, it's for you. That's all it is to it.
Nothing can get in your way when it's for you. Now,
nothing can get it.
You mentioned two different programs. You mentioned 2 different programs that you used in the military. I know I don't have any. I have no idea what they are.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. So, is that something that people still use? Those programs that you were learning?
Actually, the program that I use,
the Silhouette and Cami,
is called AutoCAD. But AutoCAD is a design software that works with applications like the Cricut and the Silhouette Cameo, which are the cutting machines that you'll find in Michaels. So that's how that all ties in together. So with me having knowledge of the programs and the software from way back before the internet was really something that people accepted. Just like the NFTs, people are like, the internet is not gonna last, it's a fad, so I actually experienced that on active duty, which is, being in the military and going through stuff like that is a little different when you're going through it in the civilian world. From that, from the twins, I decided to start drawing. And I had a lot of fear with drawing, because I was told in high school that girls that looked like me didn't do well in the field of art. So I should just go ahead and pick a real job. Wow. A real job. So I actually had a full scholarship to go to a college in Detroit, but because of my environment and I just felt a pull, I joined the military. So basically ran away from home. Ended up in digital design, which has led me to digital illustration. And the name of my business is Coco Twins. And I offer digital art for the Cricut and the Cameo, the Silhouette. But most importantly, I am a Cricut contributor that has had the opportunity to teach on Michael's platform, Michael's, the craft store, Michael's craft platform. Store, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the knowledge of art, the digital part of it, it didn't take much for me to understand what an NFT was. Before I posted my drawings on the NFT, I actually studied it. I actually had a mentor who published or who minted art and who also was able to sell art. So she helped me navigate the system. And then she also, because of me having been in the digital illustration space since 2016 and having been in the digital design space since 94, she talked to someone that's really big on one of the NFT sites, which is foundation.app. That's one of the NFT spaces that is by invite only, or you have to be voted into it. So it's not like OpenSea. So that one, you have to be invited into it. And she mentored me and helped me with the information that I needed to get my art minted and then to also put my pieces up for sale. Now, since I am an older person, because I am more close to 50 than I am to anything else. I started off with this. The Coco Twins, I started it 2016, we went to 2021. So I started it at 41. I started everything at 41.
We have that similarity, yeah.
So a lot of people will say, I can't do this, that, or the other because I'm in my 40s. Come on. You can.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I started at 45.
and do well
2016.
at it because your mindset is different compared to where we were when we were in our 20s. Because I don't think mentally I would have been able to manage the type of success that Cocoa Twins has brought me, because it's actually a registered trademark company as well. So I wouldn't have been able to manage all of that, being a new mom, a new wife, coming off of active duty, and then they don't acclimate you to civilian life. So 41 was actually the perfect age for me. So with the NFTs, I put them up. I know people say you should go to Twitter, you should go to Discord, you should do this, you should do that. But having been in the project management space for a very long time and having been doing Cocoa Twins for a while, I decided to just continue to use the same strategies that I've used for Cocoa Twins to bring awareness to my brand. Now, I'm not one that does a lot of advertising. I am not one that gets on a lot of platforms. What I'll do is try to connect with people in a way that they understand it. And one thing that I've found is that your story is what actually sells. The art can be beautiful, but people have to be able to connect with you, and it has to make sense to them. And then they also have to see longevity, because it's just like trading stocks. You have to be of value. You can't just post and run. You can't just be like everybody else. You have to put your own thing into it and let people know that there's actually a real person behind it. So when I posted I mentioned my NFTs maybe 2 or 3 weeks before I actually put them up for sale because of
Let,
gas fees.
right. Let's backtrack a little bit so we
Uh-huh.
don't lose anyone.
Oh, okay.
So let's backtrack a little bit. Let's define what is an NFT. Let's start there. So in case there's someone that's listening to this podcast and they're like, NFTs, I've heard of them, but what is it actually?
So it's a non-fungible token. All right. And the way that I explain it to the crafting community is that it is a way to, so they understand copyright and stuff like that. So it's a way to register your digital asset to a digital space that will hold that information. You will not lose ownership of that once it becomes part of a blockchain. So it's a digital asset. It could be MP4s, it could be JPEGs, it could be GIFs, it could be PNGs, it could be whatever your spirit of creativity puts on your heart to create. It can be that. It's a digital asset that is connected to the blockchain, a digital source that holds space for your art. You will forever, whatever the art is, it doesn't have to be anything drawn, anything digital. It's just anything digital. It holds space for ownership. So once you mint it, once it's part of the blockchain, that information is carried with that art for basically as long as there's a digital space.
Which looks
So
like that's going to be a long time.
yeah, a very long time, a
Right.
very long time. So I try to break it down so that way I don't go into, well, this is the blockchain, and then you have to have cryptocurrency. When you get your cryptocurrency, you have to make sure that you keep your wallet set up. So I try to break it down so that way, just like I said before, to connect with people, to help them understand that this is something that you can do. It may seem like it's really something difficult to understand and something difficult to grasp, but actually it's not. Especially when you have someone that'll break it down into basically very easy, consumable information in a way you can understand it. And being someone that's in my 40s, or being in my 40s, is my mindset is a lot different than the younger generation, where they grew up in the digital space. So in trying to understand NFTs, one thing that I ask people to consider doing is unlearning a few things. You have to unlearn it in order to allow space for that new thing to come into, because it doesn't make a difference if you like this digital space or not. It couldn't care less if you want to be a part of it or not. It is going to be a part of how we communicate and work and connect with each other. And NFTs, they're going to be used for more than just pretty things. Like once you get into the metaverse, people may use them to decorate spaces. You never know what they could be used for, because what I'm learning from talking to the different people that I talk to and being in the different spaces that I'm in is that it's really in its infancy right now. It's been around for a very long time, but not as many people talked about it up until recently. And I feel like the space that we're in now with the pandemic is forcing us to really take stock and notice of the digital space. It's really given because we can't be in front of each other like we used to. So we have to use our digital space to communicate. And one of those things that is part of the digital space are NFTs. And there are a lot of people getting into it, especially celebrities, because there is a lot of money that is part ridiculous amounts of money that are part of the NFTs. And, you know, as long as you have a good guide, it's not very difficult to get into the space, mint, and sell. I was in it for the long run. I expected at least a year before anybody would even take notice. But when I posted, I went on ahead and used the same strategies that I used for Cocoa Twins, like I said before, and was just consistent with using SEO. And when I would use my SEO for like hashtag NFT, I would find the hashtag with the least amount of postings, because I knew that was a niche right there that a lot of people will go directly to. So from there, I was able to gain followers, and I would gain at least 2 to 3 followers per day just from doing that. Not being in Discord and not being on Twitter, but being in Instagram and on Facebook. And on my mother's birthday, December 5th, which was a couple of days before I posted the NFTs for sale, somebody purchased one.
Now mentorship was kind of a big factor in you being able to gain success to be able to sell your first NFT. So can you walk us through kind of like in a general sense, like, you know, you first learned about it just probably like everyone else, you know, everyone was talking about this NFT, this digital space. We are trying to understand it. You know, maybe did you hop on YouTube? Did you take everything from your mentor? And what happened? You got invited to this, exclusive NFT auction, and that's where you found your success. So did I leave anything out?
You're good.
So I hear a couple of things. I hear a lot of coaches telling people, oh, don't get into NFTs, stay in your lane, focus on this. I'm hearing that kind of chatter. And I think that's a misinterpretation of what an NFT is, because an NFT is an investment. It has nothing to do with starting another business.
It's not.
Okay. And so I want you to clarify that one point. And then I want to talk about, you're a great artist. I see your artwork hanging in the background. I saw your artwork on Cocoa Twins, but for the non-artists, I want you to talk about what hope do we have of getting into the NFT space. So let's start with, just dispelling that whole myth about the fact that NFT is more of an investment and, more so than, it being a business in and of it itself. And then jumping into what hope is there for someone who has no artistic abilities whatsoever to get into the space.
Okay. So actually the NFT is, you have to treat it like a business. You have to have strategies, you have to create content, you have to treat it like a business, but not in the sense of you need an LLC. you need to do, this is what I mean by you have to unlearn a lot of things in order to be able to move in this space, especially as an older person. And one of the things that I've found is that mentorship in this space works best with younger people than it does with older people. So you have to do the reverse mentorship. For me, I would not look for somebody my age or older to mentor me in this space. I look for someone that's younger, because they have a grasp, but they have an understanding of it in a way that I don't. And they're not I don't want to say that word. They're not really used to, you got to get it copyright protected before you present anything to the world, so that way you protect your intellectual property rights. The blockchain actually takes care of that for you. The NFTs, if call it, if it's a business, give it a name. Give it a name. When you give it a name, just check the trademarks to make sure that it's not a trademark name, and move from there. You have to have a foundation. And that's why I say it's like a business, but then it's not like a business, but you have to have some type of foundation to get started. And then from there you can grow. With the NFT, one of the things that I do, I offer classes. I offer coaching. I am a certified creative arts coach, entrepreneurial coach, and a life coach. And one of the things that I teach non-drawers how to do is actually how to draw. And it's funny that a lot of people don't think that they have that creativity in them, but they do. And I have a lot of students. I had one that was just featured in a newspaper. I think it was in North Carolina. She couldn't draw a straight line. She'll tell you that. But now she's selling her own digital artwork. You don't have to know how to draw, not in this digital art space. And one thing with the military, with me knowing how to draw blueprints, I also know tips and techniques and tricks, so that way people can draw, because in that space, in that engineering space, people don't know how to draw, but they know that anything that can be measured can be drawn. That's the whole mindset behind how I teach people to move out of the space of thinking they can't draw to actually creating their own art. And I have a few students who have their own digital art store, have a few students who are now doing consultations because they're like, only if you knew the applications out there that are available to you to help you draw. Drawing, when you do an NFT does not have to be some perfectly straight line. It could be, we call it digital paper. It could be a geometric shapes, just a bunch of shapes and in colors, and you tell a story with it. You can go into an application like Procreate, which is a drawing application where you can put a tool against it called Liquify to turn it into an animation. You don't have to know how to draw. I
What's it
promise you,
called?
you don't.
Procreate?
Procreate.
Okay.
You don't have to know how to draw. You can take, there's an application that I teach people how to use to create their own digital paper. And if you get an opportunity, you can go to Etsy and see people are making a lot of money on creating digital paper. And what digital paper is, like the stripes on the design I have in the back, it could just be, do I have anything that looks like digital paper? It can just be any type of design that you would see, like if you go into wrapping paper. So that's basically physical paper, but you can do the same thing digitally, and you can use that. And it could be you taking your name, writing it in cursive, and then there's an application that I teach my students to use that turns it into geometric patterns. And then from there, we learn how to create something called scalable vector graphics, where we can bring it into another application called Canva and create art there. And then from there, we move it into Cricut and Silhouette. And then from there, we can move it right into the NFTs. So I show people how to take their creative art. If you know how to put colors together, I don't care if it's gray and white and black. If you know how to put colors together, then you know how to create. You just haven't been shown how to do it. That's it. And I teach people how to do that. And one of my students who's been doing this for maybe a year, she just earned herself $80,000 in passive income doing what I taught her to do.
Wow. So speaking of money, being in the space, what's kind of been like the minimum that you've seen people earn, and kind of like we've seen the maximum? Where we heard about Snoop Dogg, what he sold one single piece for 100,000. We've heard about, some art selling for millions. So let's say someone new coming into the space, what is kind of like the base amount they could be looking at in art? And do they need several pieces to get started? Do they need a single piece of art to get started? Like, how does that work?
A single piece is enough. And sometimes people don't even sell their NFTs, they give them away. They give them away. There is one person I listened to on a podcast who started this out a couple of years ago, and he gave away his NFTs on like baseball cards. He just tossed them out to the audience, and he only tossed out so many. Now today, those cards each are worth $1 million each. So he actually started with giving them out first. Then he built up his audience, and then his value increased. I've seen people sell them for $1. I've seen people give them away. And just like you said, I've seen people do it for millions. But one thing that I do is I make sure that I price mine so that way I can recoup the cost of minting, the gas fees. So there are gas fees associated with minting and selling in the NFT space. You have to pay for that space. Just like if you were renting space in a mall, you have to pay for that space. It's physical realty. In the NFT is digital realty. So you still have to pay to be in that space. But the business part of it is that you have to make sure that you're pricing yourself to stay in business and not to get ate up by the business. So you don't want to pay more than what you get back. Just like in any investment, you don't want to put in more. You don't want to put in more than what you can afford to lose. So it's you still have to have and you see my little people moving in the background. You still have to have some sort of business mentality behind this. And great guidance, because you can become just wildly successful. And if you have no business mindset whatsoever, you can get lost in that and won't know what to do next.
Yeah. And with, we talked about, the fact that people are trying to, here we have this great opportunity, and we have people that are steering people actually away from NFTs. So I'm glad you dispelled that myth that it's an investment, but it is a time investment. So, anyone that's wanting to jump into,
just like anything else.
Yeah, you got to spend some time to learn it.
You have to be in it for the long haul. If you're in it just to get rich quick and your name is not Snoop Dogg, it's not gonna happen. You have to have that. You have to have that audience and that following. There are one-offs where some people, it just is what's for them, like we said in the beginning, is just for them, and it just happens. But for the most part, it doesn't happen for everybody. Not everybody will sell their art, but the one thing about it is when you do post on an NFT, it does give you the opportunity to put that down as one of your credentials, NFT artist. And it does say something about you in the space of digital art. You're not only an artist that can create art for, a typical space like on Etsy or, the other Canva, but you know how to create art for the NFT space, which is a new space, which is like wildly popular right now. So it makes a difference. When you run your credentials, it makes a difference when you say, I am actually an NFT artist that has minted art in the NFT space. So
it took you 2 weeks to sell your piece, and if the person that purchased your piece of art goes and resells it, you get a percentage of that, right? So
I do.
Yeah, so that is, passive income at its best.
And that is my, people call me the passive income, like, because that is my thing. I teach people how to create several, I'm up to maybe 40 or 50 different ways you can turn your digital art, even if you can't draw, into a stream of passive income where you actually make soft money in your sleep, not change. And that's something that I do with Coco Twins. And having been in the industry for so long, with being a project manager and watching how things move and being at the table with people, when I get around people who have a mindset of believing they can't, it's just something that I can't connect with. And if they give me an opportunity to share my story, then sometimes it triggers something in other people, like, oh my God, she doesn't look like the typical person that would be an NFT artist, because the market is more one way than it is, you looking at me. There are not a lot of us that are in the NFT art space.
And that is so true. So what do you like, what would you say to the entrepreneur, because anybody that's been an entrepreneur, you've had graphic design work done for you. Maybe people have hit up, Fiverr or these other platforms, and they've had work done for them. And they may be thinking, well, can I turn that into an NFT?
Absolutely. Because I actually sell my art. I call it, this is something that I put together from being in the engineering field and doing the back and forth with working with somebody has an idea, getting the idea out of their head, getting it onto paper, going out to the field, taking measurements, making sure what they want works, the whole back and forth. I know it takes time, and time is money. So one of the things that came out of my experience in the engineering field that I put into the digital illustration space is creating art called copyright release art. So I'll watch trends, I'll watch what's going on, and I'll just draw art and I'll sell the rights to the art outright to the person. So whatever they choose to do with the art is totally up to them. So they don't have to go to Fiverr. They don't have to hire someone to do it for them. And then one thing that I'm moving into now is creating something called digital stamps, where when they purchase a copyright release image, they can take a class with me and learn how to add their own elements to it. So that way the art becomes their own. So, so people that purchase art outside of stuff that they've created for themselves, make sure that the person actually created it. I know stories about people who have used sites like Fiverr. There are some great stories on it, but there's still some bad stories on it where people, there's one artist I know, they stole her whole portfolio. And they, an illustrator, they're not Fiverr, but an illustrator that was on Fiverr, her portfolio, and sold it to somebody else. The person thought it was theirs. They sent the artist a cease and desist because they noticed that her art looked like theirs, and she had to tell them it is mine. Someone took my art, and they've done it to me. Someone has taken my art and they've sold it. This image that I have on my shirt now is an image that I created. Let me see if I can stand up with it. Is an image that I created while training in engineering, because I wanted to show the engineers that anything that could be measured could be drawn, and how to use the mirroring tools and how to make everything aligned. So this image was actually created in the AutoCAD software that people have taken and used over and over and over again without my permission. And because she is copyright protected, I was able to do what I needed to do with that. But people will take art, say it's theirs, and sell it to somebody else. And then you'll end up in a situation where you didn't spend all of this money to have something created and then learn that it's actually stolen artworks. So there are questions that you need to ask a person. You want to see their portfolio. You want to see anything that they've done. You want to see how long they've been doing it. You want to ask around about them. So if you do use somebody else, make sure it's somebody with a good reputation. Ask in these crafting groups, in the digital art groups, and because there's people that create NFTs. There are AI applications that will create the NFTs for you. You don't even have to draw them out. You just have to know how to read the terms of use for those. So you don't have to know how to draw. You can learn how to draw. You can hire somebody else to do this for you, but you have to understand, here's the business part of it. You have to understand intellectual property rights and ownership.
Well, that was a mind full of information, Mesha. It's crazy, but I think the one thing that people will get from listening to this episode is, there's opportunity, but you need to learn, how to get into the business. It's nothing you want to jump into head first.
No, they can get into it. They're going to have to learn how to stay in it. Anybody can get into it. You have to learn how to stay in it for the long run, because if you're not one of those one-offs where you become successful overnight, it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some mindset work, and it's going to take some believing and being patient and knowing how to rest in a space of nothing happening. And you're going to have to get in front of people. You're going to have to create content. And one thing that I tell my students is, and this Marine Corps, I'm just going to say it the way that I said. Some of us have the audacity to believe, just because we put something out there, that we deserve the rights to people. We deserve to have people purchase it from us. The audacity is so big that we'll place ourselves on a pedestal, and when we don't get a sale, then we beat ourselves up, or we'll beat up the market and the consumers. But we don't put anything behind it. We don't put any content behind it. We don't let people know it's there. But we have this expectation, just because I created an NFT, just because I created an Etsy store, I deserve to have people come and look at my work. And the truth is, you don't. You have to do the work. You have to do the work.
And just listening to you and being the mother of a teenager, I'm like, my daughter needs to get into this. My daughter needs to, because I think this is the direction we're going as moms. I mean, and I'm probably, I don't want to speak for you, but you're seeing the opportunity of the future for your kids. Anytime I hear about any of this stuff, I'm like, this is crazy, because I'm just looking at it and I'm like, there's so much opportunity out there, because I think you don't.
One of my kids is actually doing what I do. One of them is actually doing what I do. He's my nephew.
At 14.
No, he just turned 21, but he started his business when he was 19. And if the people that support him, absolutely ridiculous. The guy, the name of his business is EJE Selects, and he is an artist that he didn't think he could draw either.
And you taught him how to draw?
No, I didn't teach him. I taught him. I gave him some tips and some techniques, and then he created his own style. And one of the things that I did for him this year was I showed him where he started and where he is now. And he's like, oh my God, TT, I cannot believe I did that. And I do that with a lot of my students. Look at where you were to look at where you have to build the practice. That's what that business mindset comes in from too. If you want to have an NFT, great, create an NFT. But if you want to have an even better NFT, continue to create and create and create. Even when no one is purchasing from you, even when nobody is following you, even when you don't think anybody is watching, still continue to create. So my nephew, he will be, because I did sell art on the foundation, I do have invites. So he's one of the people that I'll give an invite to, who can get an automatic seat onto the foundation to start his NFT journey. And I'm also, look, they're still running behind me. And I'm also doing that. I have two 14-year-olds, and I'm also doing that with these guys. But because of COVID, the mindset, trying to keep them consistent, it's been a challenge. So before I put them into a space like that, I want them to be mentally prepared for it. But yes, our children, we actually can teach our children how to move in this space and how to build in this space. And some of my students, they thought that they were taking classes with me for them, but they later found out that it was for their children, because I have one whose daughter is actually a self-published author, and she's 8.
What?
She's 8.
Yeah. So I think we're just moving into a whole nother playing field for our kids. And we, so everything as entrepreneurs, everything that we're seeing out there, you're thinking about, wow, this is something for my kids as well. So Mesha, any last words as we close out this episode?
Um, any last words? Trust the gift in you. The one thing that we've all been gifted with, it looks different, but we all been gifted with creativity. Sometimes you have to, you travel back in time a little bit and look at the things you used to like to do, but were conditioned to believe that they weren't a way to earn a living. That's one thing that I've learned too, that a lot of people would tell people from my generation that you couldn't do this, that, or the other because it's not something that you can sustain your lifestyle. You
That's
can
not a real
feed yourself.
job.
I didn't want to say it. Yeah, it's not a real job. But because of COVID and my job deciding to basically shake me loose from my contract, because I was working at a university here in Maryland as a design coordinator. And because of health issues, I had to take a step back and go contract. And I asked to work from home. And my supervisor was like, I don't believe people work when they're at home. A couple of months later, COVID came about and everybody was at home. So then my contract ended up expiring. And so this year, 2021, is the first year since I was 14 years old that I have not worked for anybody.
And congratulations to you, because I know you're looking at, this is it, especially as you're looking at how much time and effort you put into working for someone else. And it's not, now it's time to take care of you and your future and your kids.
Yep. And everything we were taught is not fact. It's not fact. It's not.
And not to say people should run off and quit their jobs, but
no, everyone
not. And I wish I had known this, years ago, 20 years ago, however long ago. Don't quit your job, but always have an alternative income. And so the opportunities that you hear about on the Boss Experience podcast and, things that I talk about on Instagram, look at how can I use these opportunities to create an alternate source of income? Because I think, COVID kind of highlighted that nobody was safe. And it's funny, not funny, but interesting that in 2020, so many people lost their jobs. And in 2021, so many people walked off their jobs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in 2020, people, the job loss allowed people to reimagine how their lives should be. And now, I think we're approaching a whole new kind of era in the way we think about, earning income and, whether it's through, whether you call yourself an entrepreneur or just, someone who's looking to, make sure your family is always leveling up. I mean, however you look at it. Yeah. So how can people find Mesha Bazemore?
Okay. So people can find me by visiting Cocoa Twins, COCOA Twins, TWINS.com. And I call my business Cocoa Twins because the twins are the reason why I started this. And then people can also find me at MeshaBazemore.com. So CocoaTwins.com and MeshaBazemore.com. And one thing that one bit of advice that I give people that work a 9-to-5 and your 9-to-5 is like really just like driving you up a wall, use it as your first investor. Use it as your first investor. It can be the first investor where you have access to the internet like you don't have at home. And during your breaks, they allow you to use the internet, go on the internet and learn a new skill while you're on the job. If they allow you to take breaks and use the internet, it could be your very first investor, and that's one thing that I learned very early on when I was studying what's called VWise, Veterans Wise, where they brought us all together to teach us how to shift our mindsets away from being upset about being on a 9 to 5 and to actually being grateful for being on a 9 to 5 and how to use that to elevate ourselves and our business.
Absolutely. Great
Mm-hmm.
advice. Well, I want to thank you so much, Mesha, for being a part of the Boss Experience podcast. I want to thank the audience for joining us in learning about NFTs from Mesha. What a wealth of information she is, and it is really truly amazing. And I thank you for taking the time out today to be a part of my podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And I'll see you in the next episode.